Ladies and gentlemen, once again, we are about to begin with our proceedings. May I kindly ask you to please take your seats. If you've just come into the room, may I kindly ask you to please locate your seat and take your seats. Thank you very much, and thank you for obliging. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, may we all rise for His Majesty, the King of Sweden, and Her Royal Highness, the Crown Princess. Distinguished guests, you may be seated. Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Stockholm. My name is Nozipho Shabalala, and it is an absolute honor and a privilege to serve you as the host of this commemorative moment. Now, we're gathered here because 50 years ago, on the 5th of June in 1972, the United Nations hosted the very first global conference on the human environment. And in that moment, sparking a new era on global environmental governance. And coming out of that global conference was the Stockholm Declaration, the very first document to intentionally and deliberately make the connection between development, poverty, and the environment. And so we find ourselves here again in Stockholm 50 years later, against the backdrop of increasing climate challenges and a convergence of multiple crises coming together. And we are charged to address these interconnections and to do so with urgency, with collaboration, and with much greater speed than before. We are here 50 years later, distinguished guests, with an opportunity to make Stockholm+50 yet another moment that counts for the planet and for the prosperity of all. And so together we can come together to lift and build on the lessons of 1972 and to ensure that the roadmap that we build from here on, following Stockholm+50, is a better one. And we are here, of course, together with the opportunity to walk away from Stockholm+50 with action-orientated outcomes that are practical, that are practical and tangible, allowing us, of course, to build a world that is more sustainable and to build a world that is more inclusive. And so with that, it is my honor to welcome His Majesty to the podium to offer us his opening remarks. Your Majesty, please.
Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to Sweden and Stockholm. 50 years ago, on the 5th of June 1972, the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment opened here in Stockholm on invitation of the Swedish government. I was a young crown prince back then, and I attended the opening ceremony at the Royal Opera House together with my grandfather, King Gustav Adolf. Today, I am a grandfather myself, and I am very pleased to be here at the Stockholm+50 with my daughter, Crown Princess Victoria. The Stockholm Conference of 1972 was a historic event. At the time, the human environment as a concept was almost non-existent, at least in the public mind. Water and air was considered as free rights. Thick smoke from the high chimneys signaled progress and wealth, and it foam on rivers and waterways. Some voices of warning and concern were raised, but they did not have sufficient impact. The UN conference in Stockholm changed that. The conference identified problems, possible solutions, and suggestions for actions. A declaration with 26 important principles were adopted, declaring, for example, that wind and water respects no borders, and that a healthy environment is a human right. It also led to the creation of UNEP, the United Nations Environment Programme. Most importantly, it placed the issue of our environment firmly on the public agenda. For me, personally, the conference was starting point for a long life commitment to the issues relating to the environment and nature conservation. An interest that I am pleased to share with my daughter, the Crown Prince. Ladies and gentlemen, 50 years ago, and several environment conferences have passed since that historic meeting in Stockholm in 1972. We have come a long way since then, but let me be clear. We do not have 50 more years to turn development around. According to the IPCC, the time is running out. If we want to limit global warming, the threat to our civilization, The next few years are critical. So, ladies and gentlemen, you have the knowledge, you have the tools. Now it's time to use them. I wish you the best of luck with this conference, and I urge you to make most of it. Thank you, and good luck.
Stockholm, Sweden, June 12, 1972. Mrs. Indira Gandhi, Prime Minister of India, arrived today to address the first United Nations Conference on the Human Environment.
It is clear that the environmental crisis which is confronting the world will profoundly alter the future destiny of our planet.
1,200 official delegates from 113 nations were in Stockholm for the first international conference on the human environment.
It's an absolutely extraordinary performance, and it is, of course, set against the backdrop of Vivaldi's Four Seasons. It's a story about the prerequisite of individual action in order for us to see global change. It's a story about action. It's a story about collaboration. Distinguished guests, it is a story about the possibility of Stockholm+50. Perhaps a final round of applause, if we will, please. Thank you very much. At this moment, I'm going to ask us to kindly please retain our seats as the dignitaries are going to be making their way up to the podium for the opening session of Stockholm+50. Thank you very much.
Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, distinguished heads of state and government, ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. What a wonderful way to start this conference. And let's not forget that the fantastic human energy that we have seen at this stage was renewable energy. I declare open the international meeting entitled Stockholm+50, a healthy planet for the prosperity of all, our responsibility, our opportunity. I call to order its first plenary meeting. I wish to inform the meeting that I will serve as temporary president of the conference until the election of its two presidents. I should like to extend a warm welcome to all of you, and I'm looking forward to a successful and productive international meeting. As representatives are aware, this international meeting is held pursuant to General Assembly resolutions 75/280 and 75/326. The international meeting serves to commemorate the 50 years since the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment and its outcome documents as a contribution to the environmental dimension of sustainable development to accelerate the implementation of commitments in the context of the Decade of Action and Delivery for Sustainable Development, including a sustainable recovery from the coronavirus disease COVID-19 pandemic. I now invite the international meeting to proceed with the election of its two presidents, one from Kenya and one from Sweden. It is my understanding that there is general agreement among all delegations to elect His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces of the Republic of Kenya, and Her Excellency Magdalena Andersson, Prime Minister of Sweden, as presidents of the international meeting. May I take that the conference wishes to elect by acclamation His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta and Her Excellency Magdalena Andersson as presidents of the international meeting? It is so decided. On behalf of all participants, I congratulate His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta and Her Excellency Magdalena Andersson on their election. And I invite Her Excellency Magdalena Andersson to take her seat at the podium to take over the proceedings of the international meeting, and I request the protocol to escort Her Excellency.
So, Your Majesty the King, Your Royal Highness, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency Abdullah Shahid, President of the 76th session of the General Assembly, Your Excellency Colin Vixen Kapile, President of the Economic and Social Council, distinguished heads of state and government, ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor and a privilege for me to have been elected President of the International Meeting together with His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya. Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, Secretary General, fellow heads of state and government, excellencies, distinguished representatives of the youth, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sweden and to Stockholm+50. I'm proud that Sweden and Kenya are the co-hosts of this meeting convened by the United Nations. And we have all gathered here to deliver on the promises made to the world's population and to future generations. We are at a crossroad, a crucial crossroad. Heat waves, water scarcity, droughts, storms, floods, wildfires, melting glaciers, rising sea levels, warming oceans that soon contain more plastic than fish. We are hurting our planet. And the crisis for our environment and the climate affects all people around the world. And the developed countries are the ones who pollute and have polluted the most. But the poorest are hit the hardest. And therefore, we must ensure that no country is left behind in the green transition, and we must ensure that no person is left behind. And the transition can only be done if it's made in a social and inclusive way. And this is not just an option, this is our moral obligation. So, what needs to be done? Well, we must all live up to our commitments. We must start delivering on the declarations we have signed, on the pledges we have made. We have already talked the talk. Now it's time to walk the walk. Or, as Greta Thunberg said, the moment we decide to fulfill something, we can do anything. We shall not ignore the current geopolitical state of the world, including Russia's brutal war against Ukraine. But as leaders, we must never let one crisis overshade another. We just have to work harder. And the war in Ukraine has also made it very clear: fossil fuel dependency is not only a climate risk, it is also a security risk, and it has to end. And our countries have put in place global, regional, and national frameworks to stop the climate and environmental crisis. The Paris Agreement and Sustainable Development Goals are two examples. And we have made commitments to reduce emissions, halt biodiversity loss, and stop ocean pollution. But we are no near achieving these goals. We are lagging behind. And as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres put it, we need to do more and much faster. And the world demands it from us leaders. Industry demands it, because if it is to get new technology and new solutions in place, it needs political leadership that sets out the direction and provides the right conditions. People demand it because they see a risk of slipping behind or losing their jobs as demand for sustainable solutions, green energy, and new technology increases. And the young demand it of us, and rightfully so. Civil society, and not at least the youth movement, are a decisive force in the climate transition. We need you. But we, the political leaders of this generation, we are the ones who must do what it takes. Here in Sweden, we have chosen a long-term and determined approach to accelerate the green transition. We have made policy changes to enable companies to make the transition, and we have also made investments to enable people to keep up. Investments in education and training, security in midst of change. And climate action is one of my government's priorities in the years ahead. We will speed up this process. And hear me when I say, we won't speed up the green transition because we are kind, but because we are smart. Right now, we are witnessing the start of a green industrial revolution in Sweden. It creates thousands of jobs through investments in battery factories, green mining, and fossil-free steel production. And what we are seeing is that previously neglected areas are no longer struggling with unemployment or depopulation, but how to build housing, infrastructure, and schools quick enough to meet up with the expansion. And yesterday, right outside these doors, the very first vehicle built using fossil-free steel was presented. And it is a project as a result of public-private partnership supported by the Swedish government. But what we are witnessing right now is that it is possible to combine reduced emissions with economic development. Sweden's message is plain and clear. Going green is not only possible, it is the path to create growth, jobs, and prosperity for all. Excellencies, 50 years have passed since the very first UN conference on the human environment, when it was held here in Stockholm. It went down in history. Climate and environment entered world politics. And the 1972 conference led to the birth of a global responsibility for the climate, the environment, and sustainability. And it is my hope and expectation that Stockholm+50 will accelerate our actions. No nation can tackle the climate and environmental crisis alone, but every nation must do its part. So let's make this meeting a success by going home, doing more, and doing it much faster. I am counting on you, on your commitment, your leadership, and your support. And let our work be guided by the words spoken at the 1972 conference by the then Prime Minister Olof Palme. There is no individual future, neither for human beings nor for nations. Our future is common. We must share it together. We must shape it together. And it is my great pleasure to declare the meeting officially open. Thank you. And I now invite His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces of the Republic of Kenya, and President of the International Meeting, to make an opening statement. Please.
Thank you, Madam President. Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, Your Excellency Magdalena Andersson, the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Sweden, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency Abdullah Sharif, President of the General Assembly, Your Excellency Colin Kelpile, President of the Economic and Social Council, Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by saying what a great pleasure it is to be able to participate in this most important meeting. The UN Conference on Human Environment, which was held here in Stockholm in June of 1972, was the first major conference on international environmental issues. The landmark conference set in motion a global discussion on the link between economic growth and development, pollution of the air, water, and oceans, and the well-being of the people around the world. Today, 50 years later, we pause during this Stockholm+50 meeting to firstly take stock of what progress we have made in the last 50 years, and secondly, to reflect on how best to make the next 50 years consequential for our environment. It is clear, Excellencies, that over the last 50 years, we have deepened our understanding of the grave environmental threat that we all face. We also recognize now that we either stand or fall together because the threat affects all of us across the globe. Unfortunately, despite this recognition, we have made less progress in terms of designing and implementing bold actions to address this threat. So this meeting seeks to therefore accelerate action to avert the environmental crisis and to define a pathway towards an environmentally sustainable future. I want to thank Her Excellency Magdalena Andersson and the government of Sweden for inviting us all here to this city once again to put this agenda firmly back on the table. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Kenya proudly hosts the UN Environmental Program, UNEP, and it has done so since 1972, when the 27th session of the UN General Assembly decided to domicile UNEP in Nairobi, Kenya. Kenya has also embraced the environment agenda, and since 1972, all administrations have given it prominence in our national development plans. Indeed, Kenya's founding president, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, captured the essence of the environmental challenge when he made the following statement at the UNEP Governing Council of 1974. And I quote, and he said, "Your deliberations should touch on matters of critical concern to developing states. You will be discussing drought and desert encroachment in countries bordering the Sahara, erosion of soils and better management of arid land, and the dangers of pollution and the conservation of forests, water systems, and wildlife. Such topics are vital to the endurance of this planet and indeed to the welfare of humanity," end quote. The endurance of the planet that President Jomo Kenyatta spoke about 50 years ago is now stretched to the limit. And this challenge has without question now become a defining issue of our time. We in Kenya have maintained the strategic thrust of previous administrations and given high priority to environmental issues. And towards this end, we have taken several actions to address the threat to the environment. This includes the ban on single-use plastics in 2017 and the acceleration of the generation of renewable energy, which now accounts for approximately 80% of our clean energy. Recognizing the critical role of UNEP as a premier institution on matters environment, we continue to provide strong support to UNEP and their global office in Nairobi, and have actively canvassed member states to maintain their support for the works done under UNEP. It was therefore with great pleasure that Kenya welcomed member states and other stakeholders to the 5th session of the UN Environmental Assembly and the commemoration of UNEP at 50 earlier this year. UNEP 5.2 highlighted the urgency for the collective action to address the triple planetary crisis, namely climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss, and the adoption of path-breaking resolution on plastic pollution. Today, we once again urge all member states to quickly develop and implement a legally binding instrument to end plastic pollution. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we gather here today at Stockholm+50, let us together build on the momentum of UNEP 5 towards a bolder, more ambitious environmental action for the next 50 years. I take this opportunity to remind us all that Africa, despite its relatively limited global emission footprint, is suffering disproportionately from the impact of climate change. We are currently facing a multiple climate-related humanitarian crisis in the Sahel region, the Horn of Africa, and in parts of southern Africa as well, as a result of flooding, drought, rising sea levels. And while these crises require urgent and collective action, it is even more important to take action to forestall more such crises. We urge all our partners across the globe today to honor their commitments to double global climate finance, especially for adaptation, to enable developing countries to invest in climate-resilient infrastructure and systems. We have, I believe, an exceptional opportunity to turn climate and environmental commitments into action if we work together as a community of nations. Heightened ambition in financing and implementation should be at the core of these actions. So, ladies and gentlemen, the environment agenda, and indeed the broader triple planetary crisis agenda, is currently at the center of global discussions. Let us all seize the opportunity presented by this meeting to change the pace and quality of environment action going forward. By the time we head to COP27 in November of this year, we should all aim to have developed a comprehensive, holistic, and transformative package of environmental actions, and this should be an integrated package that pulls together the outcomes of COP26 held last November, UNEP 5.2 in March, Stockholm+50, where we are today, and the upcoming UN Oceans Conference to be held in Lisbon at the end of June this year. Let me close, and I promise you we had not compared notes previously with Prime Minister Anderson, but it looks like great statements remain great across the globe, by recalling the profound statement by His Excellency Olof Palme, former Prime Minister of Sweden, who stated, and I quote, "In relation to the human habitat, there is no individual future, neither for people nor for nations. Our future is common. We share it together, and we should therefore shape it together." As co-hosts of this conference, it is now my pleasure to welcome you all and to wish each and every one of us fruitful deliberations as we shape our common, sustainable, and prosperous future. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency President Kenyatta for his statement. And I now invite His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, to make a statement. Please.
Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, dear friends, all protocol observed. 50 years ago, the United Nations convened the landmark conference on the human environment here in Stockholm. World leaders recognize that we have a collective responsibility to protect the environment so humanity can enjoy peace, prosperity, and sustainable progress. And indeed, over the time, humanity has progressed. But today, global well-being is in jeopardy, in large part because we have not kept our promises on the environment. Yes, we have rescued the ozone layer, a remarkable example of multilateral cooperation that should inspire us as we go forward. But as we have become more populous and prosperous, our environmental footprint has become unbearably heavy. Earth's natural systems cannot keep up with our demands. We are consuming at the rate of 1.7 planets a year. And if global consumption were at the level of the world's richest countries, we would need more than 3 planet Earth. We face a triple planetary crisis. A climate emergency that is killing and displacing ever more people each year. Ecosystems degradation that are escalating the loss of biodiversity and compromising the well-being of more than 3 billion people. And a growing tide of pollution and waste that is costing some 9 million lives a year. We need to change course now and end our senseless and suicidal war against nature. We know what to do, and increasingly we have the tools to do it, but we still lack leadership and cooperation. So today I appeal to leaders in all sectors. Lead us out of this mess. Excellencies and friends, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement show the way. But we must act on these commitments. Otherwise, they are nothing but hot air, and hot air is killing us. So let me get concrete about new opportunities. Later this year, leaders will finalize a new global biodiversity framework to reverse nature loss by 2030. Work is ongoing to establish a treaty to tackle plastics pollution. And the United Nations Ocean Conference can galvanize efforts to save our oceans. But there is one thing that threatens all our progress, the climate crisis. Unless we act now, we will not have a livable planet. Excellencies and friends, scientists recently reported that there is a 50% chance that we could temporarily breach the Paris Agreement limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius in the next 5 years. We cannot let that happen. We must cut greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by 2030 to reach net zero by 2050. And developed nations must at least double support to developing countries so that they can adapt and build resilience to the climate disruption that is already happening. Today, I call on G20 governments to dismantle coal infrastructure with a full phase-out by 2030 for OECD countries and 2040 for all others. And I call on all financial actors to abandon fossil fuel finance and invest in renewable energy. Renewable energy technologies should be seen as a global public good. The necessary raw materials should be available to all, and we must scale up and diversify supply chains, reform bureaucracies to provide clarity to investors, fast-track permits for renewable energy projects, and accelerate grid modernization. Shift subsidies from fossil fuels to support vulnerable people and to advance renewables. And triple investments in renewables to at least $4 trillion a year. On top of these, we must rapidly and vastly improve energy efficiency. We must reduce deforestation and promote more forest cover by 2030. We must vastly intensify efforts to restore coastal ecosystems and at least 1 billion hectares of degraded land in the next decade. And we must also triple investments in nature-based solutions. If we do these things, we can avert climate catastrophe and the growing humanitarian and inequality crisis and promote inclusive and sustainable development. Excellencies, dear friends, today I urge countries to embrace the human right to a clean, healthy environment for all people everywhere, especially poor communities, women and girls, indigenous peoples, young people, and the generations to come. To rescue the global environment and humanity's future, We must transform the accounting systems that reward pollution and waste. We must place true value on the environment and go beyond gross domestic product as a measure of human progress and well-being. Let us not forget that when we destroy a forest, we are creating GDP. When we overfish, we are creating GDP. GDP is not a way to measure richness in the present situation in the world. Instead, we must shift to a circular and regenerative economy. And that demands a strengthened networked multilateralism based on trust and global cooperation as envisioned in the UN report on our common agenda. Every government, business, and individual has a role to play. Throughout history, humanity has shown that we are capable of great things, but only when we work together. If we want to survive and thrive, let us protect and nurture our planet, that is our only home. Let us recommit in words and deeds to the spirit of responsibility enshrined in the 1972 Stockholm Declaration, because there is only one planet Earth, and I thank you.
I thank the Secretary General of the United Nations for his statement, and I now invite His Excellency Abdullah Shahid, President of the 76th session of the General Assembly, to make a statement.
Your Majesty, Her Royal Highness, the co-presidents of the conference, Prime Minister of Sweden, His Excellency the President of Kenya, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. We meet here half a century following the Stockholm Conference in 1972. The legacy of that conference still endures. It launched the United Nations Environment Programme. It started the conversation around human impact of the environment. Its discussions and outcomes have provided a template for every major environment program, every major climate and environment-related international treaty since then, from Rio to Kyoto to Paris. And it continues to inspire new generations of activists and policymakers who cherish our Earth and work to protect its climate and ecosystems. I commend Sweden and Kenya's leadership role in hosting this conference and for providing us this space to reflect, to review, and to recommit to bolder action. Excellencies, today we confront many interlinked global crises, from geopolitical to environmental, which have once again illustrated the deep correlation between human progress and prosperity with a healthy environment. Our ability to resolve these crises and to meet the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is directly linked to our ability to address the planetary challenges we face. As an example, the pandemic's disruptions to the global economy and to the supply chains affected our livelihoods, our food security, and our well-being. Yet, as the climate crisis continues and grows exponentially in scale and in severity, our ability to effectively address these consequences further diminish. Our food systems worldwide are struggling under the strain of climate-induced consequences and the destruction of ecosystems. Drought, soil erosion, desertification, the loss of biodiversity, including marine life, and the depletion of crucial natural resources are only some of the issues we confront. We owe it to our own children and grandchildren to do much, much better. Excellencies, let us face the truth. Human progress cannot occur on an earth that is starved of its resources, marred by pollution, and is under relentless assault from a climate crisis of our own making. 30 years ago, in 1992, when I was a young diplomat, I was privileged to attend the Rio Summit. A summit, as we all know, was a result of the same Stockholm conference we are commemorating and celebrating today. It is true that since then, we have still not properly repaired our relationship with nature. However, I still retain that sense of hope that was kindled in me at Rio. I have kept that hope alive by reflecting on the progress I have witnessed in my lifetime. For example, the 1.5-degree target was once only a priority for small island developing states. Yet now, the whole world has converged around the urgency of meeting that target. I salute the work of the Alliance of Small Island States in championing the cause for the past 32 years. And just recently, we agreed to start working on an ambitious and legally binding treaty to tackle plastic pollution. We are seeing global, regional, and national initiatives taken shape, such as the African Green Wall, the Middle East Green Initiative, and many, many more. These initiatives and accomplishments give me hope. But to deliver on that hope, they must be integrated into much broader effort. These commitments must be followed by action. We need greater coordination than ever if we are to achieve the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degrees target. If we are also to safeguarding humanity and this planet's future, and if we wish to protect our biodiversity, restore life to degraded land, tackle pollution, and achieve circular economies. We need solutions that address the common bottlenecks affecting the entire environmental agenda, which will in turn accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and promote resilient and sustainable recovery from the pandemic. Excellencies, Stockholm+50 provides us an opportunity to rekindle the sense of urgency that will be needed to save our planet and leave its climate and rich biodiversity intact. That is the bare minimum we owe to our youth. Many of them are participating in this conference. They have begun to take matters into their own hands because they know what is at stake. We need to follow their lead. I am inspired by today's Earth-conscious younger generation, by their sincerity, commitment, and energy. Excellencies, Stockholm+50 is a critical milestone to accelerate a new kind of multilateralism, one geared towards a sustainable future, as envisioned in the United Nations Secretary General's Our Common Agenda. I look forward to the outcomes of this meeting and hope that they will be weaved into the General Assembly discussions and future global processes, such as the upcoming Ocean Conference, the Education Summit, and the Summit of the Future next year. I also will be convening a moment for nature in the General Assembly on the 19th of July. This will be a moment for the membership and the wider community of stakeholders to reflect on the outcomes of the multiple initiatives and conferences that have taken place this year, and to reflect on how to achieve greater synergies and cohesion across the part of all states and stakeholders and mobilize a whole of government and a whole of society approach. By working together, we can indeed fully resolve the planetary challenges we face, and I thank you.
I thank the President of the General Assembly for his statement, and I now invite His Excellency Colin Vixen Kelapile, President of the Economic and Social Council, to make a statement. Please.
Your Majesty, Royal Highness, co-presidents of Stockholm+50, Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, President of Kenya, and Excellency Magdalena Andersson, Prime Minister of Sweden, Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, President of the 76th session of the UN General Assembly, Excellency Abdullah Shahid, Secretary General of the Stockholm+50 and Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, Inga Anderson, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government here present, including my own State President of the Republic of Botswana, Excellency Dr. Mokgweetsi Masisi, Under Secretary General for General Assembly and Conference Management, Mr. Moses Abelin, honorable ministers and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great honor that I join you at this important international meeting, Stockholm+50 and the Healthy Planet opportunity. I want to congratulate the co-presidents on their election and sincere appreciation to the governments of Sweden and Kenya for their kind invitation. I would also like to recognize the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, and other members of the UN family for their tireless work in the organization of this very important meeting. Excellencies, 50 years ago, our countries and other key stakeholders convened in this very city of Stockholm of human interactions with the environment. The conference and its main outcomes reflected interlinkages between poverty alleviation and environmental protection. It laid a firm foundation for global environment governance, origins of this conference, in fact, go back to the early days of the Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC. And thanks again to a proposal of the government of Sweden, formalized in a letter to the UN Secretary General dated 20 May 1968. Today, we meet here again to further reflect on urgent actions needed to change course amidst a worsening climate crisis. Stockholm+50 marks half a century of global cooperation on environment and development. In these 50 years, we have seen major achievements in environmental protection, but we have also seen some challenges. We have seen considerable development in international law, including several multilateral environment agreements. We have seen the strengthening of science and the science policy interface through the IPCC, IPBES, and other scientific advisory bodies focused on environmental matters. Nonetheless, environmental degradation has continued and often intensified. There have been multiple factors, including the doubling world population, the growth in world trade, rapid urbanization, agricultural activity, Excellencies, this conference also takes place against the backdrop of COVID-19 pandemic, which has reversed decades of development gains and further derailed our efforts to achieve sustainable development. The pandemic has reminded us, though, that we all have agreed that a sustainable world is one in which human needs are met equitably and without sacrificing the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. We are clearly on a dangerous path to harming future generations if we do not act today. But it is within our power to turn the tide. Stockholm+50 must therefore galvanize support for decisive global environmental action. We must commit to take transformative actions and embed environmental dimensions of sustainable development in all our policies and plans. The triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution require us to work together across borders and sectors at all levels in a balanced approach to also achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Regrettably, COVID-19 has halted or reversed progress towards many Sustainable Development Goals. An additional 75 million to 95 million people will live in extreme poverty in 2022 compared to pre-pandemic levels. The world economy has slowed down again at the end of 2021. We are facing continued vaccine inequity, major supply chain disruptions, and a crippling geopolitical uncertainty. Excellencies, while our economies and societies are exposed to multiple shocks, these shocks do not impact all countries and people in the same way. A financing divide has sharply curtailed the ability of many developing countries to invest in recovery and the SDGs. In this regard, unless we take action to bridge this gap, the SDGs and our climate goals will be out of reach. I therefore wish to emphasize that stronger multilateralism and international cooperation is the key to achieve prosperity for all, in particular for the poorest and the most vulnerable. But multilateralism delivers only when it is based on solidarity, political will, joint solidarity, political will, joint vision, and common understanding. In this connection, ECOSOC will continue to serve as an inclusive multilateral platform to build a more equitable and sustainable future in harmony with the environment in the context of the Decade of Action for Delivery for Sustainable Development. ECOSOC will convene in July 2022 the high-level political forum on sustainable development, HLPF, to review the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its environmental, social, economic dimensions. In relation to this meeting, the forum will review in particular SDG number 14 on oceans and SDG number 15 on life on land and their interrelations with other goals. I therefore look forward to the recommendations emanating from this meeting, which should contribute to the HLPF. I hope to see you all at the highest possible representation in July in New York, and I thank you for your kind attention.
I thank the President of the Economic and Social Council for his statement, and I now invite Ms. Inger Anderson, Secretary General of the International Meeting, Under Secretary General and Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, to make a statement. Please.
Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, Your Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, Your Excellency Prime Minister Anderson, of course, Secretary General, President also of the General Assembly, President of ECOSOC, distinguished heads of state, heads of government, ministers, excellencies, youth, and partners and friends. My thanks Two visionary leaders came to this city for the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment. Olof Palme, Indira Gandhi, Maurice Strong, the giants of the beginning. They told us of the links between development, poverty, and environment and human well-being. They told us about care for the planet. They warned us that we were in trouble. They told us what we should do to ensure a healthy planet and healthy economies. And just after the meeting, President Jomo Kenyatta put up his hand and offered to be the host for the United Nations Environment Program, the country that we call home. We listened to them. We listened to them, but 50 years later, and we have agreements and processes and promises covering every environmental challenge, climate change, nature and biodiversity loss, pollution and waste, what we at UNEP and the world calls the triple planetary crisis. These issues are on everyone's mind. We have a human right to a healthy and clean environment, but did we really do everything these leaders told us we should do? No, we did not. We know the harm, the pain, the inequity, the injustice that the triple planetary crisis is causing. You see the distress signals that the planet is sending us. You hear the youth pleading for a fairer and greener world. You know that the sustainable developments are in trouble. If Indira Gandhi or Olof Palme were here today, what excuses would we offer up for our inadequate action? None that they would accept. They would tell us that further inaction is inexcusable. We know now more than ever the terrible consequences of marching blithely down the carbon-intensive development path that we have gorged from the earth. But we also know what we should do, and we have done some very good things over these 50 years. Dealing with the ozone layer, getting lead out of petrol, dealing with dangerous chemicals. We know how to do it. Science has told us the solutions we need for a fair and just transformational change in our economy, in our finance system, our lifestyles, and yes, our governance. And we know that the science needs to swing the needle to action. That is our moral compass. Stockholm+50 is a chance for the world to commit once and for all to deliver on these transformations. This conference is a chance to amplify a global movement for a more caring world, and a world in which the needs of youth, the more vulnerable communities and indigenous people are more important than the demands of the elites for wealth and power, a world that creates relationships of trust, a world in which people live in harmony with nature, a world that turns commitments into action. As the original Stockholm Declaration said, it is the people that propel social progress, create societal wealth, develop science and technology, and through their hard work, continuously transform the human environment. And as Olof Palme, former Prime Minister of Sweden, noted, the air we breathe is not the property of any nation. We share it. The big oceans are not divided by frontiers. They are our common property. What is asked of us is not to relinquish national sovereignty, but to use it to further the common good. It is to abide by certain agreed international rules to safeguard our common property, to leave something for us and for the generations to come. 50 years ago, inspirational and visionary leaders came to Stockholm and started the work of the environment movement. In the days, months, and years that follow, let us be the ones that finish it by unleashing a paradigm shift for the benefit of future generations. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary General of the International Meeting for her statement, and we have now heard the last speaker for the opening segment of the International Meeting. And I now invite the International Meeting to consider item 3 of the provisional agenda, entitled Adoption of the Agenda of the International Meeting. And I would like to draw attention of delegations to document A/conf 238/1, which contains the provisional agenda for the international meeting. And may I take it that the international meeting wishes to adopt the agenda as contained in document A/conf 238/1. I hear no objection, so it is so decided. The international meeting has thus concluded its consideration of agenda item 3. And I now invite the international meeting to consider item 4 of the agenda, entitled Election of Officers Other than the Presidents. And under this item, as outlined in a letter dated 29th of April 22, addressed by the permanent representatives of Kenya and Sweden to the United Nations in New York, to the President of the General Assembly. The President would like to propose that the international meeting elect 2 ex officio vice presidents from Kenya and Sweden. May I take it that the international meeting wishes to proceed according, so it is so decided. On behalf of the international meeting, I congratulate His Excellency Erkki Savisaari of Estonia on his designation as Rapporteur General of the international meeting. The meeting has thus concluded this stage of its consideration of agenda item 4. And I now invite the international meeting to consider agenda item 5, entitled Organization of Work. The international meeting has before it a note by the Secretariat entitled Organizational and Procedural Matters, contained in document A/conf 238/2. May I take it that the international meeting wishes to approve the organization of work as set out in document A/conf 238/2? I hear no objection. It is so decided. I would now like to recall General Assembly Decision 76/562, in which the General Assembly decided, without setting a precedent for future international meetings, that states and the European Union speaking at the plenary meetings may each submit a pre-recorded statement of their head of state or government, which will be played during the general debate of the international meeting, follow its introduction by the presiding officer. In paragraph 10 of the organization's work, it is noted that consideration will be given to arrangements for the preparation of the report of the international meeting. In this connection, and as outlined in a letter from the permanent representatives of Kenya and Sweden to the United Nations to the President of the General Assembly, circulated on 29th April, the President would like to propose that the content of the pre-recorded statements will be included in the summary of the discussions of the international meeting. Are there any comments? I hear no objection, so it is so decided. In relation to the leadership dialogues to be held under item 8 of the agenda, I would like to inform the international meeting that the Presidents have appointed His Excellency Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of Environment and Climate of Canada, and His Excellency Gustavo Rafael Manrique Miranda, Ministry of the Environment, Water and Ecological Transition of Ecuador, as co-chairs of Leadership in Dialogue 1. Her Excellency Steffi Lemke, Federal Minister of the Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety and Consumer Protection of Germany, and His Excellency Siti Nurbaya Bakar, Minister of Environment and Forestry of Indonesia, as co-chairs of Leadership Dialogue 2, and Her Excellency Jasmine Fouad, Minister of Environment of Egypt, and Her Excellency Emma Kari, Minister of the Environment and Climate Change of Finland, as co-chairs of Leadership Dialogue 3. I would like to express appreciation to the co-chairs for assuming this important role. The international meeting has thus concluded this stage of its consideration of Agenda Item 5, and I now invite His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta to take over the proceedings of the meeting.
Thank you, Madam President, and I now invite the international meeting to consider sub-item A of the agenda, item 6, entitled Appointment of Members of the Credentials Committee. In paragraph 29 of document A/Conference 238/2, entitled Organization and Procedural Matters, it was noted that the Credentials Committee will be appointed in accordance with the rules of procedure of the General Assembly. Its composition shall be based on that of the Credentials Committee of the General Assembly at its 76th session. The states that are members of the Credential Committee of the 76th session of the General Assembly are the Bahamas, Bhutan, Chile, China, Namibia, the Russian Federation, Sierra Leone, Sweden, and the United States of America. May I take it that the international meeting wishes to appoint these states as members of the Credentials Committee of the meeting? I hear no objection. It is so decided. The international meeting has thus concluded its consideration of sub-item A of the agenda, item 6. Item 7, general debate. Distinguished heads of state and government, ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the international meeting shall now commence its general debate under agenda item number 7. In accordance with the organization of work of the international meeting contained in document A/Conference 238/2, statements in the general debate should not exceed 3 minutes for individual delegations and 5 minutes for statements made on behalf of a group of states. Delegations are reminded that longer versions of their statements can be made available on the e-statements tab of the journal. I now invite the international meeting to view a pre-recorded video statement by His Excellency Iván Duque Marquez, President of the Republic of Colombia.
Hace 50 años.
50 years ago, at the United Nations Conference on Human Environment, we took a decisive step towards protecting the planet, placing environment at the center of the agenda as a fundamental asset. However, the decisions that we took are no longer enough. Given the crises that we have, the loss of biodiversity and pollution amongst others, one of the themes that has become even more decisive is the COVID-19 pandemic. And this calls upon us to be more ambitious in our work. Colombia is an example of the need for this, because despite the fact that we're only responsible of 0.6% of the CO2 emissions, we are one of the most vulnerable countries affected by global warming. We have updated our NDCs to reduce by 51% new GHGs by 2030, and we are committed to make progress towards carbon neutrality by 2050. And we have made progress. We have led the signing of the Letitia Pact to protect the Amazon, and we have adopted an environmental crime law, and 30% of our territory is now a protected area. So this is 8 years before the global target. We have been in the conference of the United Nations on SDG 14, and we will continue to lead the way towards zero deforestation with initiatives such as planting 180 million trees. We have invested in green taxonomy, the 4th country in the world to do that. And this allows us to have solid, transparent, and standardized criteria to mobilize resources for environmental projects. On this matter, we would like the countries of Latin America and Caribbean to be prioritized in terms of climate financing, and assistance transfer is necessary for us to be able to carry this out. And it is vital as we move towards COP27 that the new quantified finance target achieves $100 billion for developing nations. Today, more than anything else, we require efficient, just multilateralism, which will allow us to achieve the targets that will guarantee a potential future. And I am sure that the commemoration of this Stockholm Declaration will be the opportunity to endorse these undertakings. These are critical situations, the ones that we are living through, and we require extraordinary measures. And therefore, I call upon us to act now and to mobilize resources to move towards carbon neutrality and to protect our ecosystems. I thank you for your attention.
President of the Economic and Social Council, Ms. Inga Anderson, the Executive Director of UNEP, and also Secretary General of this international meeting, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, young people, and civil society. Some 50 years ago, one epic event in the form of the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment took place here in Stockholm, June 5th to 16th. The foundational text of the Stockholm Declaration with its 26 principles became our true north, galvanizing global efforts aimed at addressing the intersection of socio-economic development and environment. In subsequent conferences, sharper, more focused and targeted plans of action on the environment have been undertaken in a manner that allows monitoring, accountability, and allocation of global funding to arrest the challenges and mitigate the impact of human activities on our planet. Your Excellencies, we are the living witnesses. We are the living witnesses of the fragilities of the Earth's ecosystems and the destructive nature of disasters, as well as increased incidence of floods, droughts, wildfires, desertification, and land degradation across large parts of the world. Therefore, we have the choice of limiting our ambitions and face the full consequences of our inaction, or elect to shoulder the responsibility, take appropriate measures, and not waver from previous commitments. Needless to say, I have absolute confidence, and my congratulations extend to their Excellencies, Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson and President Uhuru Kenyatta, on their election as co-presidents of this conference. Please be assured of the support of my delegation in the onerous task of steering our discussions and dialogues around the chosen themes. Major milestones have accompanied your respective countries' role and stewardship of the environment agenda since 1972, such as the establishment of UNEP, which also recently celebrated the Golden Jubilee in Nairobi, Kenya. Botswana's unwavering commitment to global efforts for conserving our planet Earth while extracting natural resources from it is demonstrated in her joint investment in several major multilateral environmental agreements that we have ratified since the 1972 conference. I need not catalogue them here in the interest of brevity. Your Excellencies, as a country with the largest herd of African elephants, CITES is a major avenue for addressing conservation, community management, and sustainability in wildlife issues in keeping with the principles and recommendations of the Declaration. The huge elephant population poses a human-animal conflict challenge which we need help in addressing. It is therefore my sincere hope that you will be considerate to Namibia, to South Africa, Zimbabwe, and ourselves in seeking to sell our ivory stockpiles. It is also my fervent hope that we will all work assiduously to assist friends from island states against the increasing threats of climate change. Your Excellencies, I must hasten to add that inasmuch as we have had successes since 1972, we continue to experience financial and technological challenges. However, we remain grateful for the financial and technical assistance extended to us by the development partners in line with Principle 12 of the Declaration. Of special mention are our efforts in addressing the impacts of climate change. Botswana has developed a climate change policy, adapted our national determinant contributions, and developed the National Adaptation Plan. I must state in conclusion that climate change adaptation remains a key challenge for us. I therefore invite development partners and research institutions to collaborate with us in addressing these challenges to support alternative livelihood projects in biodiversity-rich areas. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the President of the Republic of Botswana for his statement, and I now have the honor to invite His Excellency Assoumani Azali, President of the Union of Comoros, to address the international meeting, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
Majesté,
Your Majesty, King of Sweden, Excellencies, Madam Prime Minister, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, President of the 76th General Assembly of the United Nations, my dear brother and neighbor, Uhuru Kenyatta, President of Kenya, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, heads of delegations, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me at the outset, on behalf of my country, the Union of the Comoros, to pay tribute to His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Sweden, to His Excellency, the President of Kenya, for the noble initiative they have undertaken in convening this conference in Stockholm, Stockholm+50. I should also like to convey our gratitude to Their Royal Highnesses, King Charles and Princess Victoria, as well as all of the authorities and the Swedish people for the warm and friendly welcome reserved to us, as well as for all of the efforts made to ensure that our stay here is a pleasant one in this wonderful and so beautiful country. I should also like to pay tribute to the United Nations, represented here by His Excellency, the Secretary General of this very important international meeting. I'd like to thank him for his involvement in organizing this meeting and its successful launch. We have convened here to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the United Nations Convention on the Human Environment, which lay at the foundation of the creation of UNEP. I wish to pay tribute to this beautiful country, Sweden, Sweden, which hosted the first summit back in 1972 and was convened us here today. And Sweden remains a champion when it comes to the preservation of the environment. Stockholm+50 serves as an outstanding opportunity for us to learn all of the lessons of multilateral action on the environment which has been undertaken over the last few decades to ensure the survival of our planet, to guarantee to present and succeeding generations the right to a healthy environment for all, especially for the most vulnerable of our communities. Allow me therefore to recall that the Union of Comoros, which hosts a unique biodiversity, which is amongst the 25 leaders in terms of global biodiversity, is recognized as a carbon sink. Well, we are suffering from the impacts of greenhouse gases and climate change. We have ratified over 25 multilateral agreements on the environment, including the 3 major Rio conventions. We have fulfilled all of the commitments undertaken in 2014 on protected areas by placing 25% of our land and 6% of our territorial waters into national parks. We have also implemented a policy of neutrality when it comes to land degradation, as we have restored 1,500 hectares of land, of degraded agricultural land. The Union of Comoros has also reviewed its national policy of the environment this year. The aim here was to ensure that it was in keeping with the commitments undertaken at an international level. We have also revised our development policy and integrated scientific research and the use of new technologies into the management of our environment. We are also implementing the policy of the Union of Comoros, 1 tree, 1 man, and to restore 50% of our forests by 2030, and to ensure that the protected areas cover 30% of our national territory. And that way, Comoros will become one of the states in the Indian Ocean region which will be at the head of the environment protection by 2030. We have an economic transition which places the environment and the promotion of green energies at the very heart of development. However, this will not be enough. This will not be enough. Despite significant progress achieved, the insular nature of our country and the lack of financial resources to intervene rapidly, unfortunately, hamper our action. My country remains a huge champion of renewable energy, whether it's wind energy or geothermal energy. We ask for assistance to be able to reverse the situation in terms of energy in our country and move to renewable resources. Now, 2009, the financial crisis, the Ukrainian crisis, all of these have unfortunately reduced and constrained the margin of maneuver for our country. I wish us to seize this opportunity of this international meeting to launch a call to all to ensure that everyone implements and achieves their commitments. When it comes to the oceans and the next COP27 in Egypt, we want this to serve as the foundation of the basis for financial contributions, concrete financial contributions in favor of our common commitments, and especially those of the most vulnerable states. And this will serve the interest of all. Ladies and gentlemen, we are convinced that the environment plays an essential role when it comes to the development of our country, where the importance of protecting it and preserving it is paramount. And this is why we wish to make the Comoros one of the tourist hubs at a regional level. And we will ensure that we use this precious gift that nature has given us. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the yearning of my country when it comes to climate change, and I wanted to share these few words with you. I remain confident that our meeting will enable us to identify actions to undertake for a better adaptation and better regeneration of our country for more development. Thank you.
I thank the President of the Union of the Comoros for his statement, and I now have the honor to invite His Excellency Mohamed Yunus Memfi, President of the Presidency Council of the Government of National Unity of the State of Libya, to address the international meeting, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
Your Majesty, King Carl XVI, Carl Gustaf XVI, King of the Kingdom of Sweden, Your Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, President of Kenya, Your Excellency Ms. Anderson, Prime Minister of Sweden, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me pleasure to thank Ms. Anderson, the President of UNEP, and Mr. Park, the head of the United Nations Environment Society, and all representatives of the member states and the other facilitators for the fruitful work that we have seen over the current session. I would also like to express my appreciation to the Kingdom of Sweden that hosted this important event. I would be remiss not to mention the employees and staff who have worked in this program over the past years, including those who were from Libya, some of whom have passed away, but their concrete results are seen today. Our assiduous work with you over this period through the UNEP and the other related treaties, the treaties related to the environment, have achieved success towards protecting our collective environment, and that is through our close cooperation with regional and international organizations. This activity helps find solutions to biodiversity loss and plastic pollution. The related treaties are numerous. They serve the Sustainable Development Goals that my country is cooperating with the international community to realize. We join the statements made by the regional groups to which we belong. Libya has made a long way in this respect, including the following examples. Libya has signed and ratified numerous environment-related treaties, as well as regional and international protocols. And at the same time, Libya worked on joining biodiversity-related instruments, including the Biodiversity Convention, Climate Change Convention, and the Ramsar Wetland Convention, along with other instruments that I will not be able to list together. My country, through the Ministry of the Environment, has declared a number of 30 nature reserves, including land reserves and other that cover marine reserves and coastal reserves, as well as other wetland reserves. We are aiming at protecting 20%, approximately 20% of the total area of the country. And as such, the Ministry of the Environment has been established to monitor and implement international standards while providing technical assistance and consultancies to related agencies. Libya is also working on using renewables, reducing greenhouse emissions. One of our national goals is to reduce the use of plastics and other hazardous materials. Libya has been suffering from desertification and land degradation, And as such, the government is cooperating with the civil society organizations to establish initiatives to rehabilitate lands, reforestation, and replanting, and increasing the green cover in the urban areas. We underscore that attention must be given to the environment in conflict countries and post-conflict countries, and I hope this will be put high in the agenda of the conference very soon. We also underscore that cooperation must be undertaken in terms of technology transfer and capacity building. In conclusion, I wish all success to you in this international meeting. We are keen to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals to realize a healthy and clean environment. Thank you.
I thank the President of the Presidency Council of the Government of the National Unity of the State of Libya for his statement, and I now invite Her Excellency Magdalena Andersson to take over the proceedings of the meeting.
Thank you, and I am informed that His Majesty the King and Her Royal Highness the Crown Princess of Sweden will now depart the international meeting. And I would like to thank His Majesty and Her Royal Highness for their participation this morning. And in accordance with Swedish practice and protocol, I will rise while they take their leave, and I invite the meeting participants to do the same. We can now be seated.
We will now resume the meeting, and I now invite the international meeting to view a pre-recorded video statement by His Excellency Alexander van der Bellen, Federal President of the Republic of Austria.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today we celebrate 50 years of global environmental action, but a lot remains to be done. Our planet is in a state of emergency. We humans are the cause of this triple crisis of global warming, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Austria is a country with vulnerable alpine regions, mountains, glaciers, rivers, woods, and they too are massively under threat by the climate crisis. The window of opportunity to avoid the worst is rapidly closing. Therefore, we must act now, and we must all do our share. We, the international community, have set ambitious goals to achieve a healthy planet and prosperity for all through the SDGs and the Paris Climate Agreement. In the European Union, we are guided by the vision of a sustainable, circular, climate-neutral and resource-efficient future, as reflected in the European Green Deal. In Austria, we want to be climate-neutral by 2040. We have introduced a carbon tax this year. We are working on a circular economy strategy. From 2025, a deposit will apply to plastic bottles and beverage cans. We have established a new biodiversity fund, and we have introduced a single affordable ticket for all means of public transport in Austria in an effort to curb traffic emissions. 50 years ago, the international community came together in Stockholm and realized for the first time that we need to act as one in order to protect our environment. Today's conference, Stockholm+50, is another important step in the right direction. The young generation is showing us the way. Let us follow their lead. Let us be bold and decisive in our action. Our very existence depends on it. Thank you.
I thank the President of the Republic of Austria for his statement, and I now invite the international meeting to view a pre-recorded statement by His Excellency Emmanuel Macron, President of the French Republic.
Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, Madam Executive Director of UNEP, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, ministers, dear friends. In Stockholm, in 1972, a new chapter in our collective history was opened, that of global environmental awareness. 50 years ago, we responded to global challenges by inventing a new form of multilateralism. In Rio, 20 years later, we adopted the three major conventions on climate, biodiversity, and desertification. From Rio to the Paris Agreement, it took us another 25 years. 25 more years to make our climate objectives tangible, concrete, and shared by all. Namely, to aim for carbon neutrality in order to limit warming to a maximum of 2 degrees Celsius. 20 years, in other words, an entire generation. Since Stockholm, there have been 5 decades of awareness raising. Necessary, so necessary, but not enough, certainly not enough. Today, scientists are no longer issuing warnings, but rather ultimatums. Climate, biodiversity, and drought crisis are accumulating in a totally interdependent world where new powers have emerged. If our duty to set an example as one of the richest nations is historic, well, our responsibilities are more than ever shared ones. France is determined to be amongst the first countries in the world to move away from fossil fuels. It's our duty, it's our responsibility to continue to act for the climate. This is the roadmap I have set for France's Prime Minister in charge of environmental planning, for it is now an absolute drive for rapid results which must guide us on all fronts and all over the world. but also an ability to plan, to change in depth the behavior of our compatriots, our companies, our citizens, our investors, of all of our productive systems, our public collective organizations, and our very way of life. I should like to highlight 3 decisive actions. To start with, as we have done on climate, we need clear targets on biodiversity by 2030. For example, that of rapidly protecting 30% of our land and seas. The biodiversity agenda is inseparable from that of climate change. Secondly, to succeed, we must massively redirect public and private financial flows towards our climate and biodiversity objectives, with an agenda of transparency that must be imposed on all. This agenda of cohesiveness must also be the agenda of reform of our trade order, which must fully integrate all these aspects. I've now said this several times. We cannot set objectives for climate or biodiversity and continue to negotiate trade agreements the way we did 20 or maybe even 30 years ago. It's incoherent, it's incohesive, and it is simply irresponsible. And finally, 50 years ago, solidarity was already identified as one of the founding principles. Solidarity with future generations, solidarity with those who are already today facing the consequences of climate change. This solidarity can only be embodied through actions, with the means of accelerating the phase-out of fossil fuels, especially coal, and build a fair and just transition. We must also mobilize in the face of the risks to food security at a time when geopolitical and climate crises are coming together and combining. Stockholm, Rio, and then Paris. 50 essential years to build a common destiny. But these will be swept away if the next 10 years are not entirely devoted to what the climate generation expects of us. That is, results. And I say this with great force on a day that should not simply be an anniversary. The geopolitical context that we are in is shaking up our lives, shaking up our political systems, and shaking up our choices. The decisions that we must take in this context of the return of war to Europe must not lead us to wait any longer. And so our generation must be the generation of results for climate, for biodiversity, against desertification, at the same time as we will have to face the return of war and its consequences. We cannot choose. These are emergencies which we must respond to together and all at the same time. I thank you.
I thank the President of the French Republic for his statement. I now have the honor to invite His Excellency Philip Mpango, Vice President of the United Republic of Tanzania, to address the international meeting, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
Excellencies, heads of state and government, in a very special way, I would like to convey to you all fraternal greetings from Her Excellency Samia Suluhu Hassan, the President of the United Republic of Tanzania, and the people of my country. Also allow me to congratulate the Kingdom of Sweden and the Republic of Kenya for co-hosting this commemorative conference and for the excellent arrangements. Excellencies, the United Republic of Tanzania is no exception to the climatic and environmental challenges that we face in the rest of Africa. The deforestation rate alone is approximately 464,321 hectares annually. Land degradation, pollution, biodiversity loss, and reduction of water sources are already threatening sustainability of agriculture, food security, and hydropower generation. In overcoming these challenges, we have begun to adopt climate-smart agriculture practices, protection of natural forests, and nationwide tree planting, as well as maintaining 307,800 square kilometers as national parks and forest reserves. However, national interventions alone are not enough to end global environmental and climate change crises generated mainly beyond our geographical borders. Our efforts are also being hindered by limited technological and financial capacities. Excellencies, 50 years have now passed without reaching the agreed targets to end the environmental and climate crisis of our time, and the situation is getting worse. Political will and resolve to take collective action has remained elusive, yet we have reached the tipping point, and this crisis is harming our country disproportionately while we are least responsible for causing it. Excellencies, in response to the prevailing environmental challenges and opportunities, Tanzania welcomes investors to partner with us to provide green technologies, especially targeting at turning organic waste into energy and other byproducts like fertilizers. We further invite researchers from developed countries to work with our local researchers and technology companies to develop appropriate and affordable green technologies to harness our huge solar and wind energy potential. Excellencies, to conclude, let me emphasize that Tanzania firmly believes that in order to ensure that our planet remains a safe place for us all to live and thrive, we, the entire humanity, must without further delay act decisively and proportionately to implement the international commitments agreed to in Rio, Kyoto, Paris, and Glasgow. I thank you.
I thank the Vice President of the United Republic of Tanzania for his statement. And I now will give the floor to my colleague, Minister Tobiko, to take over the proceedings of the meeting. Minister.
Thank you so very much, co-host. I now have the honor to invite His Excellency Nangolo Mbumba, Vice President of the Republic of Namibia, to address the international meeting. And I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
Your Majesty, the King of Sweden, Her Royal Highness, Crown Princess, Your Excellencies, our co-chair, Your Excellencies, Head of State and Government, ladies and gentlemen, Namibia salute the government and people of Sweden for their warm hospitality extended to us in this beautiful city of Stockholm. We congratulate you for half a century of focus on protecting the environment and for raising global awareness about the fragility of the planet that serves as our global habitat. Our planet is faced with a multitude of challenges, for the most part caused by how we as human beings interface with the environment. Chief among these challenges is the reality of climate change. We are faced with devastating impacts of more frequent and severe droughts, floods, bushfires, sea level rise, desertification, land and soil degradation, heat waves, food and water insecurity, and many more existential challenges. Unless all these challenges are dealt with seriously, the drive to realize Agenda 2030 and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals to deliver prosperity for all is impossible. Not only does the world face climate change, but also unacceptable levels of inequality and poverty. There should be no doubt that we have fallen short and that the current state of affairs is dire. We are not short of strategies and frameworks, but we are short of resources and political will. The Paris Agreement and the Green Post-COVID-19 Recovery Plans, among others, are in force, and Namibia is committed to fulfill its obligations. In this regard, we urge other parties to fulfill their commitments as well. Namibia supports multilateral approach to solving global problems. We are party to numerous environmental conventions and protocols. To date, Namibia is well known for its flagship conservation-based natural resource management approach, underpinned by the principle of sustainable utilization of natural resources, which ensures the protection of biodiversity and all ecological processes. To renew the commitment embedded in the Stockholm Declaration of 1972, all countries and stakeholders should promote and strengthen cooperation, enhance the implementation of multilateral decisions, and promote solidarity as a global family to achieve our common goals. Our focus must be to foster a culture of taking collective responsibility for the well-being of the planet premised on true equality. Such commitments will prevent escalation in misery in the life of the planet and its inhabitants, and will improve prospect for us and future generations for peaceful, healthy, and prosperous cohabitation. Let us rededicate ourselves to resolve the planet and to save the planet and humanity. Namibia is happy to be part of Stockholm+50, re-emphasizing the need for all of us to recommit to save our planet. And I thank you.
I thank the Vice President of the Republic of Namibia for his statement. And I now invite the international meeting to view a pre-recorded video statement by Her Excellency Delcy Rodriguez Gomez, Vice President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
Muy buenas tardes. Good morning, everyone from Venezuela, and on behalf of the President Nicolas Maduro Moro, we send our respectful greetings to this so important meeting which is taking place in Stockholm today, with one of the most important themes that we are dealing with as humanity. That is, a healthy planet for the prosperity of all, our responsibility, our opportunity. We, from Venezuela, state that it is our responsibility and our only opportunity, given these triple aspects of this planetary crisis: climate change, the loss of biodiversity, and pollution, environmental pollution. As a whole, this is the worst environmental crisis that has ever affected the human species, and the principal cause of this is man-made, the production model, capitalism, which has gone out of the normal lines and affects Mother Earth, exploitation of forestation, desertification, the loss of biodiversity, overfishing, pollution, amongst others, have caused an increase in the temperature of our Earth, water scarcity, food shortages. We don't wish to be pessimistic about the moment that we are undergoing right now. We urge for the highest level of awareness, and we cannot avoid the fact that all of those who live on this planet must be conscious of what we are undergoing. The World Health Organization highlighted the fact that 92% of the global population is living in polluted atmospheric areas, And the United Nations pointed out that plastics pollution is an environmental global catastrophe. More than 1 million of the fish and aquatic animals are at risk of extinction in Venezuela. We are aware of the threat facing the planet, and we have dedicated ourselves to reforestation. More than 33 million trees have been planted. We are a mega diverse country, and we have ensured that 43% of our territory will be protected. But we know that this is not the task of 1 or 10 or 12 countries. We require a unity. We only have this one opportunity, and we must make sure that we don't miss it. During COVID-19, the pandemic, we were witnesses of a message from Mother Nature. Let us breathe, let us exist, and then we will all be able to live in harmony. We have projections for a project for our future generations. We call upon you for unity and with all of the hope that we have in the spirit of the people of Venezuela. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the Vice President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela for her statement. And I now have the honor to invite His Excellency Aymin bin Abdar Rahman, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance of the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria, to address the international meeting, and I request the protocol to escort His Excellency.
شكرا السادة الرؤساء.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Excellencies, Heads of State. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, August Assembly. It is my honor, on behalf of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, to present to this meeting all of my gratitude and my appreciation by wishing it every possible success. Excellencies, Heads of State, ladies and gentlemen, August Assembly, 50 years have passed since the convening of the first UN Convention on the Environment. The international community has taken note of the Rome Club, which has provided us alarming information on the economic system and underscored the need to work on development, taking into account the reduced potential of our capital. 50 years later, we are facing an even more complex situation, one which has been exacerbated as a result of a number of crises, including the sanitation crisis, the health crisis, which has weakened the potential of developing states when it comes to achieving the SDGs. My country, which for decades now has faced multiple environmental crises, has worked within the framework of the program elaborated by the head of state to achieve the sustainable development in all three dimensions. We have adopted frameworks, strategies, and governmental and sectorial plans, and I'm going to especially underscore the launching of a program for renewable energy. This to achieve a production capacity of 15 gigawatts by 2050. The adoption of a national strategy for rationalizing the use of energy and the promotion of the use of renewable energy. We also have the adoption of a plan of work for the Algerian Green Dam to increase the vegetation coverage of our land through a pioneering project which, alongside the launch of the first Stockholm conference, has led Algeria to being one of the pioneers and we rang the alarm bell on developmental problems. So changes in this field will not only benefit Algeria, but all of its direct neighbors as well. Algeria has also adopted a number of national plans and strategies for sustainable development, as well as for production modes and to make them sustainable. Now, in preparation of this conference, Algeria, with the support of the Swedish government, as well as with UNEP, has been substantial, and we thank them, and we have organized expanded national consultations to enable us to move forward when it comes to achieving sustainable development while taking into account the specificities of our country. We have presented recommendations to UNEA. This is Algeria's contribution to enriching the debates that take place within the framework of that meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, heads of states, the aforementioned challenges require us to work harder to find solutions which will reduce the impact of these crises while taking into account the specificities and needs of developing states. There is a need here to recall that the historic responsibility for these crises, of course, falls on developed states who must now fulfill their commitments in terms of financial and technical support for their developing partners. Within this framework, the principles adopted by the Rio Conference back in 1992 and which represent the very foundation of all of the environmental conventions comes at just the right time. I would like here to recall the need to work side by side with our partners to achieve the sustainable development goals. And I seize this opportunity to underscore and remind you of the decision of the African Union's meeting of heads of state and governments held in Malabo on the 27th of May, and which led to the adoption of the proposal of the President Abdelmajid Tebboune in terms of creating an area of free trade which will help us to face up to the multifaceted environmental crisis. This is an approach aimed at meeting the challenge of climate change. Algeria has committed itself to financing the first meeting to set up this mechanism and invites the international community to back this continental project. It's a strategic one, and it reflects the interest of our continent in preserving a clean, sustainable environment and preserve the rights of succeeding generations to ensure that they too can benefit from our planet. Thank you.
I thank the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance of the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria for his statement. And I now invite the international meeting to view a pre-recorded video statement by His Excellency Boris Johnson, Prime Minister, First Lord of the Treasury, and Minister for the Civil Services of United Kingdom of the Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
When delegates from 122 countries assembled in the Volkertshus half a century ago, among them, it so happens, was one Stanley P. Johnson, also known as my father. The gathering caused skeptical eyebrows to be raised around the world because in the depths of the Cold War, the stewardship of our natural environment was thought to be a fringe concern. Why, people asked, was the UN troubling itself with such trivialities when there were serious issues to contend with? But 50 years on, we should all be very grateful that the UN did, because the fate of our planet still hangs in the balance, and the future of countless species and ecosystems is far from secure. And the situation would be immeasurably worse were it not for that journey that began in Stockholm in 1972. Every conference and treaty and agreement since then can trace its lineage back to that meeting, including COP26 and the Glasgow Climate Pact. an event that saw nature move from the margins of the debate on climate change to the heart of our response to it. Yet for all the progress that stemmed from Stockholm, there are still those who will look at this meeting and once again ask why we're spending time on this issue while Europe is at war, while the cost of energy is soaring, while the pandemic continues to trouble much of the world. But the simple truth is that a healthy planet is a peaceful and prosperous planet. The Russian tanks churning up Europe's Ukrainian breadbasket and driving up the global price of food underline the need for a more resilient and sustainable food system. The worldwide energy shortage, with all its impact that it has on household bills, shows exactly why we've got to hasten our transition to the unlimited power of the wind, the tide, the sun, and the atom. So this is not the time to pull back from environmental concerns, but to double down, to keep 1.5 alive, to keep our Glasgow promises on revising and strengthening NDCs and doubling adaptation finance. We need to end deforestation, restore our ecosystems, and wake up to the importance of biodiversity to global development and, with it, to global stability. We in the UK are playing our part, pushing for ambitious targets, supporting others to reach them, investing billions in climate change solutions that improve biodiversity, and my colleagues are bringing governments, businesses, and indigenous peoples together here in Stockholm to protect the nature on which global GDP depends. Now, we need others to do the same. 50 years ago, our predecessors recognized, and parents, recognized the need for concerted, united, worldwide action to protect our planet. Half a century on, the need for change remains great. But we have the means and we have the ability to make it happen. This week, let's show that we also have the will. I hope you all have a great conference.
I thank the Prime Minister, First Lord of the Treasury and Minister for the Civil Services of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland for his statement. I now invite the international meeting to view a pre-recorded video statement by Josiah Warek Bainimarama, Prime Minister and Minister for E-Taukei Affairs, Sugar Industry, Foreign Affairs and Forestry of the Republic.
Honourable Ministers, distinguished representatives, Bulaminaka from Fiji. It takes a short walk along any shoreline in our country to see how tied our people's lives are to nature. The sheltered nurseries in our mangroves sustain the fish stocks in our reefs, which in turn sustain our families. Our forests support our livelihoods. Our rivers connect our communities. And I know I speak for every Fijian who makes their living fishing, farming, or preserving forests when I say that we need our environment far more than it has ever needed us. That is why, ahead of this meeting, a new Jobs for Nature program in Fiji will employ thousands of our people, including young people, to protect, restore, and harness nature. It takes humility to understand humanity's place in our one connected global ecosystem. It was in that spirit that leaders convened in Stockholm 50 years ago to begin this global effort to defend the natural world. A half-century on, it falls to us to take sober stock of the state of nature. Due to three planetary crises, climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss, we can count the years to ecological collapse on a single hand. The latest science tells us we have a 50-50 chance of passing 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming within the next 5 years. Before we even reach 2030, we could lose coral reefs across the entire equatorial region, destroying 500-million-year-old ecosystems in a single generation. Tuna stocks could flee our waters for cooler climates, and priceless troves of biodiversity could be raised. In 2020, I was the UN Environmental Programme's Champion of the Earth. That was quite an honor, and I'm proud of what Fiji has done and what we continue to do to uphold our people's constitutional right to a clean and healthy environment. But Fijians aren't the only ones who choose Fiji's future. We count on the world to follow our lead. For that, humanity needs more than champions. We need change, a change in mindset, a change in how we engage with nature, and a change in the expectations we set for our leaders in government and in the private sector. Stockholm+50 is a chance for that change. We must deal frankly with our failures, past and present, and commit to an urgent course change to a better relationship with nature and a better future as a result. My friends, we can't waste this moment. Let's treat this crisis like a crisis before it's too late. Let's end plastic pollution here through an international instrument. Let's commit to a new global compact for the environment, the ocean, and all life on Earth that has ambition, political will, and financial resources to save the one planet we have. We in Fiji will do our fair share and more. Thank you.
I thank the Prime Minister and Minister for Itoke Affairs, Sugar Industry, Foreign Affairs and Forestry of the Republic of Fiji. I now invite the international meeting to view a pre-recorded video statement by His Excellency Abiy Ahmed, Prime Minister of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I would like to express my appreciation to the government of Sweden and the government of the Republic of Kenya for co-hosting Stockholm+50. The Stockholm Conference was the first conference to make the link between development and the environment. It was also one to place the issue of poverty at the front and center. And today, this commemoration represents an open discussion about maintaining a positive relationship with nature. This discussion comes at a critical juncture. It comes at a time when we are all dealing with different environmental concerns as well as rising inequalities. Hence, the necessity of working together to achieve a healthy planet for all of us. For example, as a global community, we cannot escape the daily repercussion of a pandemic. This is a key lesson we have learned from the breakout of the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, we must foster trustworthy ties between state and non-state actors in order to increase collaboration and solidarity. We can do this by rethinking our future together through inclusivity, knowledge exchange, and learning. This is critical if we want a healthy planet for everyone's sake. As we mark the 50th anniversary of the Stockholm Conference, we must consider what we have done to implement the principles of the Stockholm Declaration, both individually and collectively. More significantly, we must prepare ourselves for the rising environmental challenges that we now encounter on a regular basis. To that end, it is vital to ensure that adequate means are put in place to strengthen national and institutional capacities. It is also important to build the necessary capabilities to comply with the international environmental agreements. I believe my country has been doing its fair share towards ensuring a healthy planet on all fronts. Our Green Legacy Initiative, for example, is an ambitious national flagship initiative launched in 2019 aiming to plant more than 20 billion tree seedlings by 2022. By 2021, we proudly managed to plant 18 billion seedlings already. This year, we will exceed our 4-year milestone. This initiative has already paved the way for collaboration and solidarity in the sub-region, as we have been sharing our Green Legacy Initiative to neighboring countries in the spirit of unity. Now, in the final year of our 4-year target, we will surpass the set goal. The nation lays a foundation for generational well-being. We invite all willing partners to join us in sustaining the Green Legacy journey for generations to come. I thank you.
I thank the Prime Minister of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. I now have the honor to invite Her Excellency Teresa Ribera, Vice President and Minister for Ecological Transition and the Demographic Challenges of Spain, to make a statement, and I request protocol to escort Her Excellency.
Buenos días.
Good morning, good afternoon. 50 years since the meeting in Stockholm, where we first recognized the global and collective responsibility of managing our environment, we have had some incredible advances made. However, we are still very far from having achieved the objectives that ought to even have designed the way in which to deal with them. We are still, we've made progress in but the difficulties that we have grows in an alarming form, and the rhythm of our work is too slow. We are making changes, but they are not sufficient for the deep transformation, radical one, which we require. The challenges 50 years ago are now crises. Crisis in biodiversity, crisis in pollution, and they are affecting the progress of human development. And the key question is, how can we reply? How can we act to make sure that we rise to these challenges? We need to have a better balance at local and national level, an interdependent society which requires local proximity, and to evaluate the effects as they cascade down from our decisions. And these alliances need to be created so that we can work together towards our shared goals based on strong and just societies which will allow us to have real progress for our present and future generations. It is indispensable that we gain time and facilitate the changes that we need to do. If we do not set forth those bases for change, then we will not achieve change. We need to make sure that the distribution of what we have is just and equitable. The processes of transition are indispensable. We require information, societies that are empowered so that they understand why this is necessary. We need the professionals to be able to accelerate this transformation without falling into hopelessness. Action, action, action. specific solutions, integrating different ways in 3 particular areas: water, energy, and soil. These are the basis of our challenge. We have to make sure that our societies are able to do this, accelerating a response that cannot wait. And we must make sure that we take into account what is necessary for our investments, but we ourselves today are responsible. We cannot have the luxury of helplessness, hopelessness, or to look back with nostalgia, nor can we be smug. We cannot project ourselves forward to the next 50 years. It's this decade which counts. Let's work together and provide the bridge that allows us to unite the future with the past. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the Vice President and Minister for the Ecological Transition and the Demographic Challenge of Spain for her statement. I now have the honor to invite Her Excellency Yves Mazaiba Massoudi, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, to make a statement, and I request protocol to escort Her Excellency.
Excellence.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the President of the Republic of the DRC and of its government, I should like to convey my gratitude to the Kingdom of Sweden for its hospitality, as well as for the very warm welcome reserved to us. It is a true pleasure for me to find myself here before you to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the United Nations Conference on the Environment. This wonderful event coincides with the 50 years of the environmental action in my country and the setting up of a Ministry of the Environment for the protection of nature in my country. Ladies and gentlemen, a healthy planet for prosperity for all. This is our responsibility. For 50 years now, we have destroyed nature, and we were not successful in achieving the objectives set to us within the framework of UNEP. So my country, the DRC, was able to preserve its environmental assets until today, and this was achieved as a result of the will of its leaders and its people to protect its environment for present and succeeding generations. The DRC thus enjoyed the honor of hosting the preparatory work for COP27 in partnership with the Arab Republic of Egypt. Faced with the triple global crisis, climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, the DRC now presents itself as a solution. As part of a contributive approach, we present our forest potential, our wetlands, our strategic minerals, and our water resources as a solution to this global crisis. We wish to achieve, or rather to limit, the global temperature to a rise of 1.5 degrees centigrade, and thus adapt ourselves to the new climate. The Congolese forest sequester over 140 gigatons of CO2 with the help of the EU and Belgium. The recent scientific studies based on observations carried out from the tower installed in the Byamgambi Reserve, Biosphere Reserve in the northeast of my country, clearly show that the forests of the Congo Basin are the first global lung when it comes to carbon sequestration. My country, despite its environmental potential, has not sufficiently benefited from the Climate Fund. This is why we await equitable financing in exchange of the services rendered by our forests. Through the application of the polluter pays principle, this compensation should not be considered as assistance or help for development, but this is a right as a result of the sacrifices made by our people to preserve its environmental potential. We are ready to engage in serious discussions for sustainable development for everyone. We wish to draw the attention of the international community to the fact that the DRC, as a country who presents solutions to our problem, faces a number of very serious problems to its environment, including the armed conflicts in the east of the country, which unfortunately are backed by certain neighboring states, and we ask them to respect the sovereignty of our country. To save mankind, there is no time to lose. We have to act now. And this is what His Majesty Carl Gustaf has said, and we pay tribute to him. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development of the Democratic Republic of the Congo for her statement. I now have the honor to invite His Excellency Borislav Sandov, Deputy Prime Minister for Climate Policies and Minister of Environment and Water of Bulgaria, to make a statement. And I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
Honorable President, Vice President, Head of Governments, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. While we have gathered here today to discuss the triple planetary crisis, I believe it is also very important to point out that we are facing another crisis that gravely threatens all the values that this organization stands for. And this crisis is the Russian aggression in Ukraine. Therefore, we need to reaffirm our strong solidarity with Ukraine and its people. It is a great honor for me, together with you, to commemorate the 1972 United Nations Conference on Human Environment and celebrate 50 years of global environmental actions. A lot has been achieved during the past half century, but a lot more remains to be done. This requires strong multilateralism and as well as collaborative efforts contributing to the MEAs and Agenda 2030 implementation. This is the only way to address the economic and social challenges, which are even more critical in the context of COVID-19 pandemic and the debt, food and energy crisis. The green and inclusive recovery, in line with the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement, requires optimal use of all available financial resources. In order to build back better, we need to invest in human capital, social protection systems, and in sustainable, resilient infrastructure and technologies. Bulgaria works hard to provide an appropriate framework for green transformation. Our Recovery and Resilience Plan envisages funds for projects aimed at increasing the share of renewable energy sources, development of electromobility and the respective infrastructure, industrial technology solutions for green hydrogen and energy savings, digitalization. We are also introducing waste management policies in a way that does not endanger people's life and health and provides them with a clean and favorable environment in a circular economy. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize that the implementation of the 2030 Agenda is a shared responsibility that requires a holistic approach through continuous and strong involvement of all stakeholders, including all national, regional and local authorities, private sector, social partners, academia and civil society. The time to act together is now. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for Climate Policies and Minister of Environment and Water of Bulgaria for his statement. I now have the honor to invite His Excellency Bojan Marichkik, Deputy Prime Minister in charge of European affairs of North Macedonia, to make a statement, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
Dear Excellencies, Honorable Co-Chairs of the Stockholm+50 distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It has passed half a century since the first UN Conference on Human Environment in Stockholm back in 1972, and we are still discussing global environmental challenges. North Macedonia and our government comes together with the global community to support the shared vision for a healthy planet for the prosperity of all. This act reflects the urgent need for actions to address the environmental issues, climate instability, biodiversity losses, heavily pollution, waste and chemicals as unprecedented challenges for the humanity. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warned us that the climate change is here, now, and it is rapidly getting worse. Climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution are damaging prosperity, health, and equity. Humanity is facing a pandemic, an economic crisis, and an ecological breakdown. Therefore, we cannot afford to lose any of these battles. In the process of winning these battles, North Macedonia takes part in many multilateral environmental agreements. The country has applied integrated approach by ratification of wide range of UN conventions as chemicals, waste, nature protection, biodiversity, air pollution, water management, climate changes, and ozone depletion. We also put efforts to implement the requirements in a synergetic manner through development of the national strategic and legislative framework. By amplifying the decade of action, the United Nations contributed the continued support of local, national and global partners to secure and strengthen existing efforts and to deliver on the sustainable development goals as it was expected. However, following coronavirus pandemic, today's energy crisis, security issues, climate crisis, the expected level of progress on the SDGs have slowed down. But this is not a reason to quit and to be discouraged. We know that if we would like to succeed, we must embrace green and resilient transformation through accelerated action on SDGs implementation. In this manner, North Macedonia made efforts in reaching SDGs and converting the UN development system reform into practice. Therefore, the government of North Macedonia started the preparations for the development of National Development Strategy 2242. NDS, the strategy will help us frame the Agenda 2030 challenges and provide a greater focus on their implementation, trickle down the policies that the EU has been pursuing, including the Green Deal and the Digital Agenda. Further on, North Macedonia, as a party of the Paris Agreement, as well as an EU candidate country, remains fully committed in order to contribute to the global climate goals and actions and to the key European Union priority for reaching the climate neutrality until 2050. We have set down a long-term vision, North Macedonia by 2050 to be a prosperous, low-carbon economy following sustainable and climate-resilient development pathways, enhancing competitiveness and promoting social cohesion through action to combat climate change and its impacts. In the fight against these challenges today, regional cooperation has an important role to play, especially in meeting the objectives of the Green Agenda for the Western Balkans. In the regional dimension, our country endorsed the Western Balkan Green Agenda in December 2020, and in terms of green transformation, our country is the first country in the region to make an energy transition from thermal power plant to a capacity that will produce electricity with photovoltaic. Proper response to environmental pollution, chemicals and waste management, climate change and other challenges of the planet requires coordinated action by different stakeholders and individuals, as well as partnerships between science, business, policymakers, the civil sector. This is a guaranteed way that we will come to adequate solutions that are important for the sustainable development and protection of the planet and everything that lives and breathes on it. I will conclude by sending a clear message that nowadays Our responsibility and opportunity is to present that our legacy given 50 years ago at the Conference on the Human Environment can be fulfilled by building a healthy future for all of us and the upcoming generations. Stockholm+50 is an excellent opportunity to achieve a prosperous, inclusive and resilient planet. Stockholm+50 is all about a healthy planet, so we must act and we can act. I wish you a successful conference, and on behalf of my government, I would congratulate Sweden and Kenya for the organization of this conference. Thank you very much.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister in charge of European Affairs of North Macedonia for his statement. Distinguished heads of state and government, ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the meeting will continue hearing statements in the general debate. We still have a long list of speakers, and I wish to remind speakers of the time limit of 3 minutes. Give me paper. Okay. For national statements, and 5 minutes for statements delivered on behalf of groups. Speakers with longer statements are encouraged to read the shorter version of their text and submit the full length of their statement to the Secretariat for posting on the conference website. To assist the speakers in managing their time, a timer is being projected on the screen. In case speakers exceed their time limit by 1 minute, the microphone will be automatically deactivated. I apologize in advance of speakers are cut off. This measure is being taken to ensure that all speakers can deliver their statements in the limited time available for the general debate. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Sherry Rehman, Federal Minister for Climate Change of Pakistan, on behalf of the Group of 77 and China.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. With your permission, good afternoon, President of the International Meeting, Secretary General of the International Meeting, distinguished ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is my singular honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the G77 and China. There is no doubt that humanity has degraded nature, and its consequences are becoming clearer over time. Natural calamities in the form of extreme weather events and climate patterns such as droughts, flood, desertification, and the emergence of zoonotic diseases are only a few of the strong signs of nature's response. The current unsustainable patterns of consumption and production portend a doomsday scenario. The message from science in this regard is also resounding. Regarding climate change, the most recent IPCC report clearly identifies the actions that are urgently required. We need ambitious and bold actions today to reduce the impacts of climate change and to ensure the protection, conservation, and sustainable use of our environment and natural resources. Excellencies, the COP26 resulted in positive and ambitious mitigation targets to meet the long-term goal to hold the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. This requires rapid and sustained reductions in global greenhouse emissions by the developed countries. Developed countries have been historically responsible for the majority of global emissions and should make an absolute and significant reduction in their emissions. In this context, we also emphasize that in the transition to global net zero, developed countries must take the lead, and this transition should be based on the principles of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. Moreover, without new, additional, adequate and predictable financial, technological, and capacity support from developed countries, the developing countries will be unable to achieve these goals and targets of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement. New and additional public climate finance must be urgently mobilized with greater balance between financing mitigation and adaptation. It is essential to avoid double counting in the provision of development assistance and climate finance. Excellencies, developed countries must fully deliver on the long overdue and as yet unrealized goal to mobilize $100 billion per year for climate finance for developing countries. We also welcome the agreement at COP26 in Glasgow to initiate further discussions on enhanced commitments for a new, collective, quantified goal on climate finance from the floor of $100 billion and prior to 2025. We need to ensure concrete and meaningful progress in these deliberations in a way to significantly boost the provision and mobilization of climate finance in accordance with future requirements and considering the needs and priorities of developing countries. We also highlight the need for long-term and affordable financing for biodiversity and the need to exponentially increase financial flows with biodiversity objectives, including measurable, predictable, and effective financial resources and institutional arrangements for the provision of finance, capacity building, scientific and technological cooperation, and technology transfer for the benefit of the developing countries. Such resources should be new and additional to funding already provided under other multilateral environment regimes. Excellencies, increased action to address loss and damage is a legitimate demand of the developing countries, especially those which have emitted the least but suffered the most from climate change. No financing has been committed so far for loss and damage. In this sense, we call for the provision of new financial support to developing countries to address loss and damage, in addition to adaptation and mitigation finance. Furthermore, developing countries would also need financial and technical support to build capacity for the planning and implementation of adaptation and mitigation projects, as well as to enable their access to climate finance, including concessional finance. The simplification of the procedures of funding entities and mechanisms for accessing climate finance is particularly important for the poorest and most vulnerable developing countries. Excellencies, deep and persistent imbalances in the geographic representation within the United Nations Environment Programme must be addressed, and the underrepresentation of the Global South as well. The group believes that due regard should be paid to the principle of equitable geographical distribution in the recruitment strategy of the United Nations Environment Programme at all levels. Moreover, we take note of the progress made in the development by the board of the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production patterns of a global strategy for sustainable consumption and production beyond 2022. And we highlight the importance of an inclusive and transparent process for the ongoing development of the strategy that is fully responsive to the specific challenges faced by developing countries and consistent with the 2030 Agenda and its SDGs. And we invite all stakeholders of the United Nations system for strengthening the implementation of the 10-year framework of programs through 2030, enabling partnerships and commitments for action. We also welcome the holding of the first One Planet Network Forum to promote a global and inclusive dialogue for the implementation of SDG 12 and sustainable consumption and production. Excellencies, in conclusion, allow me once again to reiterate that the Group of 77 and China stresses the need to ensure adherence to the core principles of our multilateral environment agreements, such as equity and common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. The group also believes that discussions outside the existing multilateral agreed frameworks and conventions must not prejudge ongoing negotiations under these frameworks. I thank you for your patience, chairs, and I also wish to take the opportunity to congratulate Sweden on holding a most spectacular opening plenary today. Thank you.
I thank the Federal Minister for Climate Change of Pakistan for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Virginijus Sinkevičius, Commissioner for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries of European Union.
Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. It's my privilege to deliver the statement on behalf of the European Union and its member states. I would like to warmly thank the host country, Sweden, as well as Kenya, for their leadership. It is very fortunate and timely that we can continue here in Stockholm what we started this March in Nairobi, our reflection on and indeed celebration of 50 years of global environmental action. In 1972, the groundbreaking Stockholm Conference on the Human Environment was called out of concern about the health of our planet and to stimulate urgent action to protect the environment from the man-made harm undermining our well-being. So where do we stand half a century later? We have come a long way with the milestones of the two Rio and Johannesburg conferences, the network of multilateral environmental agreements with the United Nations Environment Programme and its assembly that keeps the world's environment under review, with the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda. We have created a significant framework for action that accounts for many measurable successes. But the transformation laid out in Agenda 21 has not happened. And despite our efforts, we are today dangerously close to potentially irreversible cascading tipping points in the Earth's systems, which would have dramatic consequences for all life on the Earth. The Earth's surface continues to significantly warm, with current temperatures on average warmer by 1 Celsius degree compared to 5 decades ago, and with the ocean warming up as well. Ocean more and more loses its ability to regulate our climate. The loss of biodiversity around the globe has accelerated roughly 1 million of animal and plant species being at risk of extinction. Pollution results in millions of premature deaths annually. The triple planetary crisis caused by climate change, biodiversity loss and pollution is soaring, and according to the UN, it is undermining hard-won development gains and impeding progress towards ending poverty and hunger. Reducing inequalities and promoting sustainable economic growth, work for all and peaceful and inclusive societies. Put simply, if we fail to address the planetary emergency, life as we know it will disappear. But should we not reinvigorate the sober yet optimistic vision of the Stockholm? The vision that humankind can defend and improve the human environment for present and future generations, and the belief in our capability to wisely transform, to bring to all peoples the benefits of development and the opportunity to enhance the quality of life. We know what needs to be done to achieve this vision. But where science is clear, our purpose is not. Where bold and far-reaching action to transform our socio-economic systems, production and consumption models, financial flows and food chains is needed, hesitation prevails. Sustainability is the only option. We need a renewed global consensus to step up our pace to achieve sustainable development, to fulfill our commitments, notably the SDGs and Paris Agreement, and take ambitious steps towards halting and reversing biodiversity loss and ending pollution. We also need decisive steps to put sustainable consumption and production, circular economy and sustainable finance at the center of our policies. On our part, the European Union has put forward a comprehensive transformative strategy called the European Green Deal that will transform Europe into a climate-neutral, clean and resource-efficient economy and make our society and our environment thrive. But we are only part of the world we live in. So the EU is working to reduce its external footprint and at the same time reaching out to our international partners to tackle the global emergencies, as we can only succeed when acting together. It is thus so important that once again the world has come together in Stockholm for a UN conference. It's clear that we must use the maximum extent of our multilateral system in the spirit of solidarity, responsibility for each and other, shared care of the next generations and of the planet they will inherit. There is no room for wastage of our time, our precious resources, our food, our lives. We therefore recall our deep concern and condemns Russia's brutal invasion of its sovereign neighbor Ukraine that violates the very foundations of the multilateral order and directly threatens stability on our planet by spreading violence, causing environmental disasters and deadly food and energy crises. We request Russia to immediately stop its war of aggression. Ladies and gentlemen, the EU and its member states urge all to take responsibility for the future of our planet and to take it now. May Stockholm 2022 inspire us to be bold and act with urgency. This is the decade to get the things right. Thank you.
I thank the Commissioner for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries of the European Union for his statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Leila Ben Ali, Minister of Energy Transition and Sustainable Development of Morocco, on behalf of the African Group, who will also make a statement in her national capital. Capacity.
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to deliver this statement of behalf of the African Group, which aligns with the statement delivered by Pakistan on behalf of the G77 and China. Stockholm+50 is a historic moment to commemorate the 1972 UN Conference on Human Environment. It celebrates 50 years of collective global action, but more, it is an opportunity for the world to reflect on the progress, on the gaps, and on the challenges. Stockholm+50 is timely while we are preparing for the COP27 in Egypt. We all aim to make drastic progress in international efforts to address environmental challenges. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, over the past 2 years, COVID-19 has taught us critical lessons. Our future is as hopeful as the strength of our cooperation. The challenges of our time do not give us the luxury to walk in isolation. We need to rise above our stark differences and fight for the common good of current and future generation more and much faster. We stepped into the decade of action with massive pandemic disruptions. We are running out of time to act on climate, to act on pivotal development goals. It is time we move strategically and act urgently. We need to ensure that all multilateral agreements and processes strengthen systematic follow-up of action, commitments, and progress on multi-stakeholder pledges. We need greater overall accessibility and efficiency of financial flows to address climate change in Africa, both mitigation and adaptation. We need more efficient and less complex practices for accessing climate finance from different bilateral and multilateral funders, or as simply said by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, we simply need to reform bureaucracy. The country's NDCs need to translate into a pipeline of bankable projects to attract investment at scale from the private sector, private capital investments catalyzed by improved fiscal policies, as well as by private climate financing. Together, we should strengthen UNEP to be the leading global environmental entity and to make it fit for purpose to respond to the evolving environmental challenges that we are facing today. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, more and much faster. We need to increase investment in resilience as well as greater alignment of finance and insurance against increasing risks posed by climate shocks. Lives can be saved through proactive planning and disaster risk management. The African Group emphasizes the need for supporting the implementation of renewable energy initiatives, including the Africa Renewable Energy Initiative, the SDG 7 initiative for Africa to increase clean energy actions in NDCs, and support credit enhancement instruments to fast-track investments for those actions. The group underlines the importance to support African countries in their just transition plans and calls upon development partners to support a fair and just transition to secure workers' rights, provide social protection for affected communities, and build necessary capacity to deliver clean energy networks and to ensure the provision of energy needed for Africa's economic transformation and growth. We should address critical gaps in technology transfer to support country development and implementation of NDCs and long-term strategies. The group stresses the need to enhance commitments to address the drivers of desertification, land degradation, and drought, and support existing programs such as the Great Green Wall for the Sahara, Sahel, and Southern Africa, the adaptation of African agriculture initiatives, the African Forest Landscape Restoration Initiative program to combat desertification in Southern Africa initiative. More and much faster, agriculture employs more than 60% of African population. We need to leverage strategic partnerships through the private sector and international financial institutions to create a larger pool of funding for our smallholder farmers and agriculture SMEs. If we narrow the digital connectivity gap and healthcare system gap, productivity will increase and will create more opportunities for women and youth, has the potential of lifting over 60 million people out of poverty. Thank you very much.
Yes, Her Excellency Leila Ben Ali, now your national statement. Welcome.
Thank you. Sayyid Rais.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, allow me at the outset, on behalf of the Kingdom of Morocco, to express my sincerest thanks to the governments of Sweden and Kenya for all the measures taken to organize this important meeting for all of us in order to promote multilateral cooperation for the environment. 1972 was a landmark event in the history of the United Nations, as it helped us to start a global process and to ratify a number of multilateral environmental agreements. And despite the strides we have made at the level of environment over the past 50 years, today's challenges are more significant. In such special circumstances we're going through, we are approaching the irreversible point, and we as governments and individuals should take measures in order to reconcile with the environment and reconsider our consumption patterns and to achieve sustainable development. The more we wait, the more weak and the less resilient we are to address environmental challenges. We should believe in our common capacity, and we should also be aware of the consequences. We should promote solidarity among states, especially when it comes to implementation tools, because providing financial resources and technology transfer and capacity building will not make the implementation of the multilateral agreements a burden for developing countries towards a safer and more environmentally friendly planet. We have expressed our voluntary commitment, and we have engaged under the leadership of King Mohammed VI, may God protect him. We have engaged in international efforts in the area of environment and sustainable development. We have also engaged with all multilateral environmental agreements. We have introduced them into our national legislation, and we have also established tools for good governance and sustainable governance. We have also developed ambitious programs for energy transfer and the protection of forestry, clean agriculture, and industry. This is implemented through our new model. We have also introduced ambitious initiatives to help Africa in the face of climate change. We have 3 climate committees for Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, the 5th session of the United Nations Environmental Assembly was a milestone to promote multilateral cooperation, given the significant outcome that was achieved. Morocco, as chair of the 6th session of the Environment Assembly, we pledge to spare no effort to cooperate with all parties and to translate action into tangible results for the benefit of present and future generations. I thank you.
I thank the Minister of Energy, Transition and Sustainable Development of Morocco for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Kyriako Tobiko, Cabinet Secretary of Environment and Forestry of Kenya.
Vice President and distinguished delegates, Excellencies, my President had in the morning delivered his statement, and I have a lengthy national statement, and I don't want to read it. We shall deposit it in the repository into the record. Just to say a couple of issues. Kenya associates itself with the statements that have been delivered on behalf of the African group by Morocco, and also by Pakistan on behalf of the G77 and China. 2, and as co-host and co-president, let me take the liberty to say about what exactly is on our minds as expectations. We do, I'm sure, all of us expect that we shall use and utilize this opportunity to look back 50 years ago, 72, the conference, and the declarations and the action plans. And look back 50 years, identify the successes and the failures and the missed opportunities, and see how we can learn lesson and build on that. But we also have to look in the future. 50 years now or from now, do we have a future? The scientific reports that have been published, IPPC and others, indicate that we are on borrowed time. One was described as
code red, and the letters described as "Our house is on fire." There is urgency in dealing with the triple planetary crises of climate change, nature and biodiversity loss, land and ecosystem degradation, pollution and waste. And it is upon each one of us, leaving no one behind. So here, partnership, collaboration, and it cannot just be left to government alone or state parties. So it is a responsibility of each one of us. We expect that at the conclusion of these proceedings, we shall have concrete, actionable points. But along with that, also the ability and means to implement those actions. Now we associate ourselves with those who have made a case and been making a case for the necessity for support, means of implementation. The developed countries that have means in terms of technology, in terms of resources, and without blame gaming, but I think it is also on record that 20 countries that combined have 80% of global GDP contribute more than 80% of the global emissions. So there is responsibility. Each one of us has a responsibility, but more so those that bear the greatest responsibility. And finally, we are here for our children. The saying goes, the son I have already been.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary of Environment and Forestry of Kenya for his statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Silvia Calvo Armengol, Minister of Environment, Agriculture and Sustainable Development of Andorra.
Presidents, ladies and gentlemen, 50 years since the meeting in Stockholm, the world is facing a planetary crisis which is threatening our well-being now and in the future. And as politicians, we have an enormous challenge which is existential, relating to achieving the objectives of the Sustainable Development Goals. The increase in population and in consumption means that we have devoted too much extraction of resources, and the 90% of these environmental issues, such as climate change, by GHGs and loss of biodiversity, as well as pollution in the air and the water, means that we need to change the paradigm in our way of consumption and producing and move towards the circular economy. The policies relating to energy transition and fighting climate change are the perfect example for investment that needs to be more sustainable and better prepared for a future good outcome. The natural environment, the biodiversity, is an important social function. This has a direct effect on our health and economic development of countries. And for this reason, we need to make sure that our investment is sure, responsible, and necessary for current and future generations. We need to make sure that our livestock is managed in a sustainable manner with a high added value, so that we can also preserve our environment. We note more and more the close relationship between consumption, health, and the quality of our environment, and the place that we can look at. We must definitely respond and accept our share of responsibility. Andorra is a mountain country, and those of us who live in mountains are direct witnesses of the impact of climate change on our habitat, and we note the footprint of the consumption model on biodiversity. Our country is working conscientiously to fight the climate crisis, and we hope to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, and we're about to adopt a law on circular economy. Our natural environment is vulnerable, and in order to protect it, we must work on programs that will have us achieving clean water at 100%. We cannot do this without taking into account what we must do with youth, because these are the ones who are most affected by the legacy that they will receive. We must educate our young people in knowledge about the environment and show them the importance of bringing about best practices. The Stockholm meeting in 1972 created many and good opportunities for our collective relationship with the planet. We must not be seeking excuses for not having done this. Now is the time to do this. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the Minister of Environment, Agriculture and Sustainable Development of Andorra for her statement. I now give the floor to Orlando Jorge-Mera, Minister of Environment and Natural Resources of the Dominican Republic.
Señor Presidente.
President, Excellencies, it's a great honor to represent the Dominican Republic and President Luis Abinader during this international conference in Stockholm, whose theme is Only One Earth. I hope that the world is aware of the current situation that we are emerging from COVID-19 pandemic, dealing with the war between Russia and Ukraine that is impacting all of humanity, and at the same time dealing with climate change, biodiversity loss, and combating pollution and waste. This important forum, whose theme is A Healthy Planet for the Prosperity of All, makes reference to our need to change the world, a driver to move from inaction to action, each of us making a change in our spheres of influence in order to change our harmful patterns and come up with solutions. We are in Stockholm, Sweden, a country that we are attached to thanks to the friendship of the then Prime Minister Olof Palme with renowned Dominicans such as Francisco Pena Gomez, who served to cement our friendship. The cooperation between Sweden and the Dominican Republic is underscored with its contribution to the Sierra Plan for Forest Management. During the statement of 1972 of Olof Palme in opening the conference, he gave an example on the importance of dealing with the sustainable environment. Of course, in 50 years we have achieved a lot, but there is no time to lose in this ecological transition. In countries such as the DR, climate change hits us hard due to our position, our small island developing state. All this while the Latin American region has emitted less than 8.3% of greenhouse gases, and for the Dominican Republic, 0.06%. However, we are the region that is most vulnerable to climate change, especially the Caribbean. The country is listed among the most vulnerable countries to climate change, ranking top 15, while Haiti, a country that we share an island with, has in the last 2 decades been ranked top 3. We are focused on moving away from the traditional method and coming up with a new post-COVID model, investing in energy mix, diversification, sustainable transport, circular economy, developing new sustainable tourism, digital revolution, and nature-based solutions. A very important aspect of our adaptation policy is the restoration and conservation of protected areas. Our goal is to achieve 30% of protected areas, land and marine, by 2024. However, we cannot do all this alone. There is need to uphold the goals in the Paris Agreement that are still pending. There is need for us to remain below 1.5 degrees Celsius globally, bring an end to the ongoing subsidies for polluting industries, ensure efficient quality financing, especially for adaptation and for biodiversity. As we deal with climate change, there is need for recuperation and recovery financing. This is a priority for the world, for the region, but especially for small island states and the most vulnerable countries such as the Dominican Republic. We will continue promoting moves such as this for regional action because we are the last generation that can reverse this crisis. So let's get to work. Thank you very much.
I thank the Minister of Environment and Natural Resources of the Dominican Republic for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Gustavo Manrique, Minister of Environment, Water and Ecological Transition of Ecuador.
Distinguished heads of state and government, distinguished ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I am sure that solutions can be found, but concerted international action is absolutely necessary. In fact, it's very, very urgent. With these words, at the first United Nations Conference on the Human Environment, Olof Palme, former Prime Minister of Sweden, predicted the need for a global response to the environmental crisis. 50 years later, we meet once again, now with 193 sovereign states and many other relevant actors, more conscious than ever that this environmental and climate crisis is more vital than ever for us to deal with. Much has happened since 1972, including a pandemic that has redefined our reality. It is not for nothing that today we are celebrating 50 years of hard work focused on defending the right to a healthy and balanced environment, reflected in the progressive incorporation of more than 500 multilateral environmental agreements, an achievement that should be highlighted. However, let's be honest and recognize that this international normative development has taken too fragmented an approach to these environmental problems. And this has had the effect of discouraging the coordination and synergy needed to implement such agreements at times. The actions that we take at the international level have a direct impact on national realities. Ecuador is one of the 20 most mega-diverse countries on the planet, which together possess more than 2/3 of all the world's biodiversity. This privilege comes with responsibility towards the needs of current and future generations. This is why we're leading several initiatives to ensure the integral respect of nature and human well-being. For example, Ecuador was the first country in the world to recognize the rights of nature within its constitution. We are the first country in Latin America to establish an ecological transition policy promoting co-responsibility in environmental protection. We have established in the last 12 months 7 new protected areas, and we will expand the application of extended producer responsibility, which together with the strengthening of the recycling chain will allow us to move from 4% waste recovery to 20% by 2025. And in Galapagos, we have declared the creation of the Brotherhood Marine Reserve, incorporating an additional 60,000 square kilometers to the 138,000 square kilometers already in existence. And we're extremely proud that we achieved this by consensus. We also have created the largest corridor in the world with other countries, and we did this with the fisheries sector as well. We worked on this with the presidents of Colombia, Costa Rica, and Panama for the creation of this Eastern Tropical Pacific Marine Corridor. And this is the new currency that we need. We also launched a decarbonization program by 2050. These are some of the examples of the commitments that we have for sustainable development. However, it is imperative
I thank the Minister of Environment, Water and Ecological Transition of Ecuador for his statement. Okay, slight delay. Okay, then close. We have heard the last speaker in general debate for this meeting. Before concluding, I would like to remind the delegations that Leadership Dialogue 1 on reflecting on the urgent need for action to achieve a healthy planet and prosperity of all will be held at 3 p.m. this afternoon in the Victoria Hall. The general debate will continue today at 3 p.m. in this hall. This meeting is adjourned.